I thought this is a good opportunity to give you a detailed tour around Sarah Ann. So I'm going to start with going around the outside of the hull. I installed an outlet here which is for the automatic bilge pump. I did move the wet exhaust and that was a pretty ordinary sort of fitting there, so I replaced it with a nice bronze one. Now we've got our stern light here which used to fill up with water, but it looks like I've managed to knock that on the head and it's now not filling up with water anymore, but I'm a bit disappointed with what I did with this wire. Should have really brought it up underneath. Not really happy with it going through there, but anyway, it's there now and it's all nicely sealed. The 2-pack polyurethane is just working absolutely beautifully on this hull. The hull is mostly built out of King Billy pine, which is a very soft timber, and yet the 403 Uracryl racine product is absolutely performing superbly. Doesn't even take stone chips up the bow. The solar panel is a temporary resident on the boat. It really doesn't do anything for the aesthetics of Sarah Ann, and the plan is that I will eventually replace this solar panel, which is actually a very practical solution. It's not pretty. I'm going to see if I can come up with a flexible panel, perhaps a curved one, to go on the cabin top. Now somewhere in this rudder there's a bit of steel, just mild steel somewhere, because we're getting this bleed through here. I don't know what it is, but there's something there that's causing that rust and I need to find out what that is. So this is stainless steel, the banding here on the rudder, and goes nearly right to the end there. Little repair. This is a reversing chip, something that happens with a trailer sailor. We've got the stuffing box, which was the source of some major leaks, and turned out I don't think this stuffing box had ever been serviced in the life of the boat, and there was just no packing in there, and the water was just leaking straight in quite copious amounts. Done. I've had the propeller off, and that's all nicely greased up on the spline so it can come off easily. Now I'm thinking about putting it on a mooring for a while, and if I do that I'm going to need a sacrificial anode. And then the question is, well, there's not enough room on the shaft, and the anode has to be in contact with metal and contact with the seawater. In other words, it's got to be on the outside of the boat, and it needs to be connected, which it could be connected by a wire to, say, the stuffing box somewhere, but there's just a little flat spot here on the deadwood, and I've got an anode which I can cut so that it fits nicely around the stuffing box, and then bolt it on here in contact, in very firm contact with the bronze stuffing box. Now I have had the rudder out and everything's in beautiful condition there. There's no gland on this, it's actually a pipe that just runs all the way above the waterline. Pintle is in very good condition as well, so she hasn't been sailed a great deal. We've got a pair of scuppers here, just 3/4 inch pipe, and to my eye they look a bit on the light side, but on the other trailer sailors that I've had, they've had bigger scuppers, but the problem is the water can flow back into the cockpit as well, and they do tend, when you're under power and they start to bury themselves a little bit at the stern, water can flow back through there. So it's only a very small cockpit, but it would take a long time to drain with these scuppers, just a pair of 3/4 ones. Along here you can see something else which I fitted, which is the transducer for the depth sounder. So I went to the trouble of investing in a bronze transducer, which is kind of compatible with the Garmin depth sounder. We do lose some of the fish finding fancy stuff that's on there. At the moment I've painted over the top of some hard anti-fouling with again the Racine 403 acrylic 2-pack polyurethane, and it's performing very well indeed. So you can see it is a wooden boat. Wood moves a little bit, so it's peaking a bit in a few spots, and I noticed that where the deadwood is here, it had cracked just a little bit, opened up a little bit, so I've just dabbed a bit of 2-pack primer on there as a temporary measure. Now the first part of Trailer Sailor is trailer, and I've been blessed with an absolutely beautiful heavy-duty trailer, and you can see there that's the end of a 5-metre drawbar extension, runs right through and enables me to launch on launching ramps that are a little bit flatter than others. I've only needed to use it once or twice, to be honest with you. I don't know that I'll ever really need to. I have been planning for some time to take Sarah Ann off the trailer and punch these axles from the rollers out and put some grease on them, because she does bind a little bit when she's leaving, because I'm tending to launch and retrieve off the trailer rather than rely on floating the boat off. These rollers here are dropped down to give enough clearance, so they just guide the boat onto the trailer as it's coming on, and I've dropped them well away from the hull. I don't want the boat supported on the wobble rollers. Wobble rollers are actually not intended to support the boat, they're intended to guide the boat. The weight of Sarah Ann is borne on the keel 100%, and then she's strapped on both sides to stop her rocking back and forth, and then the wobble rollers just guide her and keep her straight, as do these guides, which should be mandatory on any trailer for a boat which has got a bit of a keel on it. Fasten your seat belts. I'm going to give you a drone tour of the low head area, and then after that I'm going to come back and give you the tour of the interior of Sarah Ann. On our recent trip to Low Head, I waited and waited and waited to launch Sarah Ann, but as you can see, the wind blew and blew and blew, and the rain rained and rained and rained. If you look out through the window behind me, you'll see why it is that I'm not out on the water today. I had planned to be out and sailing by now, but no, it's definitely not going to happen in Force 9, Force 10. And that's why the ladies are cooking up a storm. This is the point break at nearby Bellboy Beach. I spent many hours windsurfing here in my 20s and 30s. I once broke the gooseneck on my windsurfer 2 kilometres offshore here and slowly drifted in, much to the consternation of my dear wife, who was watching from the headland. I'm going to give you an aerial tour of Low Head and the pilot station from the Airbnb that we stayed in right on the beachfront. I highly recommend the little place we stayed in. I think it's one of the best places in Low Head, and there's so much to see there. So this is where Sarah Ann spent the 10 days, in the backyard of the little Airbnb we were staying in. Well, I did manage to get a bit of work done, and then the rain set in, and then I spent the rest of the time learning how to use this newfangled video program that I'm producing this video on my iPad. Local shack owners have built a breakwater and little fish trap at the southern end of Pilot's Beach. It's quite shallow there, and it dries out at low tide. My favourite part of every day was an early morning walk up the beach to the pilot station. There's a museum and a cafe at the pilot station, and a lot of the little cottages that were built for the people that worked in the pilot station over the years have now been turned into Airbnbs themselves. Well, back home, Bess is still sitting there, even though we've had gale force winds. She's crying out for my attention, and I plan to turn her into the ultimate open cruising dinghy. Many of the posts which I was previously putting on Facebook will now go directly to Patreon. You won't see them anywhere else. What do you think about that, ladies? Bit of a close call, eh? That limb came out of the tree during storm force winds and it just missed the back of Sarah Ann. So we had some storm force winds last night, and in 50 knots and more for 2 or 3 hours. And that limb has come out of that tree up there. The weather's foul outside. It's misty rain and cold wind blowing from the northwest or westerly, and I'm in the relative comfort and warmth of Sarah Ann's cabin. I say relative comfort because despite my best efforts I haven't been able to resolve the leaks in the deck. Well, the reason why I haven't been able to resolve them is there are no leaks in the deck. I took the chain plates off and put them back, quite a big process, and didn't fix it. But I've discovered that the leaks are in fact in the cabin sides. So where this, I don't know what you call this vertical piece here around the cabin sides, if you know, let me know in the comments. But this corner piece here has opened up where the cabin sides butt into it, and it's leaking down that seam. I've shown you from the outside already. Telltale sign that we have a problem. My toolkit is full of water. Not to mention the drips. Sarah Ann is only 18 feet long, but I do have full sitting headroom. In fact, plenty of it to spare. Even if you're a 6-footer, you'd be able to sit in here. But when you've got a very limited amount of space, you've got all the same shapes as a normal conventional sailboat. You've got all the same spaces, but they're all a little bit smaller. So you've got to be careful about what you choose to put in the boat and how you pack it all away. As you can see, the forepeak is chock-a-block full of sails and wet weather gear and fenders and lines, and also anchors and rode right up there in the forepeak. But I'm going to excavate that a little bit for you right now so that I can show you what space we have. So let's see what I can do to excavate a little bit of space up forward. The toolbox was quite well positioned because it's caught all the drips coming off here. So let's see what I can do to excavate a little bit of space up forward. These are the new fenders that I purchased. I think I got them off Amazon. They look alright, they'll last a few seasons. Apart from the fact that wooden boats do have a tendency to leak a little bit, and that's something you've got to continually stay on top of, wooden boats do have the advantage that they are relatively warm. The wood itself is a good insulator. I carry an extra 10 litres of diesel here. So the tank itself I think holds about 15 litres, and then we've got an extra 10, which is enough to keep me going for a year. Well, that's taken less work than I expected. I did have her fairly tidy because I was preparing to take her for a sail. Under here there was a fair bit of storage, and originally there was a lead acid battery that was mounted up here somewhere, but I've actually screwed these down. I think this one, front one, comes out, but it sits on, oh no, it's actually screwed down through here. Now the reason for that is that I've filled this section up here with about 200 kilograms of lead ingots as ballast, and there's also a bit of heavy chain in there, and it's all wrapped up in rubber to stop it moving around. A couple of sort of little lightweight bulkheads that have been put in. Now that was for anchor, stowage and chain and road. There's the stem post, so bolted with stainless steel bolts, and that would be hue and pine there. As you can see, the planking on the boat is in very, very good condition. None of the fastenings needed to be replaced. It's been, I believe, rebaited and epoxy glued. So it's pretty much a bulletproof construction. You can see a little bit of the effective ingress of water around that hatch. And again, it's the joint between the vertical members that are attached to the deck and the deck itself. We're now looking at the beam shelf, which I think that beam shelf is actually made of plywood, and then we've got some little knees there, also made of plywood, and you can see the piece of face ply, a nice bit of figured plywood there. I don't know what it is, but it's the end of the little storage shelves. Looking aft on the starboard side, looking up underneath the side deck, again you got that nice bit of figured plywood. Used to make some really nice specialty plywoods back in the 60s and 70s. I went through that factory. The knees throughout the boat are ply. A lot of the structural stuff is marine grade ply, 3/4 marine grade ply, and the beam shelf itself is mostly plywood. I'm not sure about this. I reckon, just looking at the thickness, that it is sawn from plywood. So Sarah Ann is a little scaled down H28. The builder of Sarah Ann built quite a number and helped on quite a number of H28s when he was apprenticed by Cecil Cartledge on the Tamar River. And so I'm pretty sure that Sarah Ann is a bit of a tribute to the H28 heritage. The waterline on Sarah Ann is sort of somewhere up about here. So this configuration, a nice piece of stainless steel that John fabricated, enables the cable for what is a fairly lightweight centerboard. It's just a little 6mm plate, which after rusting for 55 years is probably closer to 4mm, pitted like a moonscape. And he built this winch. I actually relocated the winch a little bit. It was a bit lower, and they had a turning block in there to get the cable going into it. But it's very easy to operate. I can't operate it because it's on the trailer, of course, so I can't lower it. We do get a bit of water coming out through this spout here, and I find just a bit of fibre, microfiber cloth stuffed in there has completely eliminated that. And you can see that I've changed the wire cable to a piece of Dyneema, which is more than adequate for what it has to lift. The turnbuckle, which is a pivot point for the mast, which lays flat because it is a trailer sailor, and no leakage around there at all. I did attend to what had been a leaking boot around the canvas, and I replaced it. I have to confess that I used fiberglass. I glassed it very, very strongly so it just can't leak. Keep some condiments and things in here. And here you can see one of the biggest challenges that I'm faced with. You can see that these copper nails that have been put through here are very compressed. They've obviously had issues with the center case leaking here, and as they've compressed those nails, they've compressed the timber, and it's starting to look a bit on the ugly side. So I drilled some holes in here and squirted some epoxy in, and that cut back 90% of the leakage that we were getting around the center case. I also raked out these joints. I didn't make them any bigger than they were, but I just cleaned them out, and I've just for the time being put some polyurethane sealant in there, and that has sealed her up. You just get the merest little bit of a leak that comes in there. But the plan is these beautiful pieces of King Billy rebaited here. For some reason they let go. Just clean up all the rebates. I think it'll pop apart quite easily, and then glue it back together, finish it all up, and then refit it down into the keelson there. It is a little bit untidy there. Apologies for the housekeeping, but I keep all my cleaning gear, mosquito net, and cutlery and crockery here, and there's a fire extinguisher there, which is readily accessed from inside, probably not so readily from outside if you had to reach in. So this wild weather is still coming through. We're just getting cold front after cold front after cold front. You can see the mast of Bess sticking up there with the clouds scudding by from the northwest. When I got her, Sarah Ann was essentially just an empty hull, and there were a few vestiges of wiring from the past. It had some nav lights, an internal cabin light, and VHF radio, and I think that was about it. So the first two circuits are vacant at the moment for later additions. Then I've got the interior cabin light. I've got my nav lights all set up with really nice bronze fittings that I've been able to acquire from different places. Then I've got my VHF radio here. You might have heard that beep when I turned it on. And then here, this last one is showing that the voltage meter. It also runs a couple of USB outlets. So I've got a 1 amp and a 2.1 amp 5 volt USB outlets in there. And then this is your traditional power outlet with a cigarette lighter, which I could plug a fridge into. And settling down now, so you can see the voltage is sitting on 13.7. It is hooked up to the solar panel, which has been doing a really nice job of keeping the battery topped up, and I'll show you the charge controller down there in a minute. We've got a 110 ampere hour AGM battery in there. It's actually a crossover battery, deep cycle / engine starting, and eventually I would like to have a house battery independent of that, but certainly I can run lossless on that with the solar panel arrangement, 100 watt solar panel that I've got, and that runs through. You can see these cables have got to be tidied up a little bit still, but that solar panel runs through this PowerTech controller, which is I think a 20 watt controller. Everything's connected up using these 50 amp Anderson plugs, and the reason for that is that I want to be able to disconnect things when you don't want them. For example, if I'm running, if I'm at home and I'm close to the workshop, I'll disconnect the solar panel, or if it's in the shed there, I'll disconnect the solar panel and I'll connect the PowerTech charger that I've got. Sorry, no, Victron charger. I've actually got some Victron gear. So everything's protected by that 50 amp circuit breaker there, which is probably too big. Probably should be 25 amp, and it runs through this master switch which is currently on. I'll just turn that off, and then I've got an independent circuit here for the bilge pump. You can hear that running now. Actually, you can hear there's actually some water in there that it was sucking up. So there's been quite a bit of leakage for that to be running, because that was on the automatic circuit there that I just had it on, and it cut out. So the modifications that I've made to the float switch, yeehaw, they are working. And then we've got an override there, which is a manual override. Push the button and it runs. So you can see the float switch down there, which is doing its job nicely. It does leave about an inch of water. I just couldn't figure it out. It was just so difficult to get that combination of float switch and bilge pump located properly, but that is indeed working very nicely there. So I hadn't realised that there was so much water in the bilge, but yeah, we are leaking quite a bit more than I would like it to be doing. So here's the Volvo MD1. I installed a water exhaust there, which was quite an interesting project. Had no experience of that before, but that's working beautifully, not getting any water back into the engine. I've been having quite a bit of trouble with bleeding this engine. I need to get some anti-corrosion spray onto that area there. I thought I'd sprayed everything up, but yeah, there's quite a bit of corrosion starting to appear in there. But I have to bleed that every time I start the thing, and well, not every time I start it, but once I've turned that stopcock on and I bleed it, then it starts flawlessly 100% of the time. But when I shut that off, despite the fact of having replaced a lot of copper compression washers and so on underneath here, try and get the camera in there. So all those compression washers have been changed on the banjo nuts, but there's still some little tiny leak, and the diesel gradually drains out, and until I turn the stopcock back on and then bleed it, and then it just starts flawlessly. And here's a nice, so as far as the engineer's toolkit goes, here's a nice little touch from the days when she had a simplex in her, which was a petrol engine. The companionway steps are probably a bit of overkill for a little boat like this, but my wife has some mobility issues, and I wanted to make it really easy for her to get in and out, so it created these two steps. And then they're also entirely covered over the engine, just to make the cabin a little bit more homely. So as I said, I like my technology. I'm a bit of a techno freak, really. So anyway, apart from the VHF radio, which is programmed with MMSI, it's not showing location details on there at the moment, because the GPS, let's see if I can get the cover off, the GPS is not turned on yet. So if I turn that on, it'll pick up the location and it will transmit that down to the VHF radio. And I've set this little chart plotter unit, which has also got sonar in it, and I've set it up so that it swings around and can be swung. If those washboards weren't in the way, it can be swung out there and secured so that I can keep an eye on things from the cockpit. I'll just zoom out there and you'll see where I am. So this is the Tamar River, one of my favourite places. You can see, you could then see the location of all of the beacons. We don't have AIS, but it is showing shipping there. That's interesting. I wonder where it's getting that from. Perhaps you can explain to me. So just continuing to zoom out. So here we are at what I love to refer to as down under, down under. So that's the land down under, up above, mainland of Australia, with Tasmania down there, about 400 kilometres across Bass Strait, and New Zealand out to the east.